In her 50s, she effortlessly made men fall for her. At the age of 65, she drove her young admirers to utter exhaustion. Numerous charming young men competed for her notice. And the ladies-in-waiting tasted them as if they were servants, sampling royal cuisine. Sex was her passion, her drug, her weapon. She used her sexuality to rise to power. Her charm was the key to building the world's mightiest empire. And it was intimacy that ruined her life. The life of the most influential woman in the history of the Russian Empire.
Spanish fly is a substance used to enhance male virility. It was this powder that caused the death of the Empress's lover, Sasha Lansky. Fearing that he would not meet her expectations, the young man overdosed, and the substance became poison.
Lansky was no exception. The Spanish fly was often used by many of the Empress's favorites, as it was otherwise challenging to satisfy her in bed. This was particularly true when she was in bed with younger men. She was forgetting her old terror. A nightmare that would cause Catherine to wake up screaming for the rest of her life. 1736 year, Prussia. She looked in the mirror and shuddered. A monster was staring back at her. A pale, pained face, one shoulder higher than the other, a stooped left side, and a large hump on his back. Oh God, no, it's not her. The future Empress Catherine, who was then a girl named Sophie, was 7 years old when she fell ill. Severe pneumonia almost killed her, but now she wished she hadn't survived. The disease led to complications in her spine and resulted in her becoming physically disabled. Even worse, her mother now looked at her with outrage. She had high hopes for her daughter. She wanted her to have a successful marriage. Their family was old, noble, but very poor. Sophie's successful marriage could fix everything. But now the girl has transformed into a monster. It meant downfall of all a mother's hopes.
Indeed, our heroine spent her childhood in this state of mind. It was always all or nothing. Much was expected of her. And the whole life of our heroine was dedicated to refuting this. All her life she has been trying to do whatever she wants. She conducted various experiments, including those of a sexual nature. These experiments were designed to demonstrate to everyone, and particularly to herself, that nothing disastrous would occur.
The father adored his daughter, but was rarely at home. The impoverished prince had to train the royal soldiers all day long. In his absence, Sophie tried to stay in her room, fearing she might run into her mother. But one day, her mother came into Sophie's room with a strange, gloomy visitor. When she saw him, the girl froze. He was the city's executioner.
At that time, they barely knew how to treat the spine, but Sophie was fortunate. The executioner was knowledgeable in anatomy and designed a special corset, not made from soft plastic as it is today, but from cast metal. This product weighed over 7 kilograms. It was quite burdensome. The iron corset constricted a person's bones and internal organs. However, there was no alternative to such harsh treatment.
The pain was unbearable. It felt as if her bones were on the verge of snapping. The last thing the girl remembered was the executioner's face and the clanging of the iron bars. And then it got dark. She didn't want to regain consciousness because a terrible pain would return with it. From now on, she will seclude herself in her own room. She will shatter all the mirrors, close the curtains, and cease communication with her peers. She will hide from her parents and household staff. The only thing that will make little Sophie happy is books. Her own fantasies will scare her with their realism. Many years later, the future empress would describe one of them in her memoirs. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It smelled like grass and flowers. Sophie saw a large field. She wanted to ride through it on horseback and feel the wind blowing through her hair. Without realizing what she was doing, she wrapped her legs around the pillow and started to bounce, then gallop faster and faster without stopping. Across the field and further into the forest, she woke up with a strange feeling. A pleasant warmth spread throughout the lower abdomen. It permeated her entire body, filling every cell. It was impossible to resist. What was that? Sophie didn't comprehend, but she kept immersing herself in her fantasy over and over again, until one day her mother walked into the room. Sophie froze, felt the impact, and remembered the piercing scream. It was painful, humiliating, and unclear why. The girl could not understand what her fault was.
This is the most renowned Prussian education. Any act of disobedience was not just perceived as terrible, but as a catastrophe. Girls who were frequently prohibited from certain activities in their childhood often grow up to be women who pursue unrestricted pleasure.
Sophie will not abandon her fantasies. Despite my spiteful mother, despite everyone, but every time she does, she feels like a little deviant, an ugly duckling. Ugly and shameless. This feeling won't fade in 4 years, when Sophie takes off her corset and sees her true beauty in the mirror. Yet it will remain repulsive and unattractive in its own right. Lonely and unneeded. Sophie could not have known how indispensable she would soon become to 2 empires simultaneously.
Sophie Friederike August of Anhalt-Zerbst was a member of an ancient royal family. Her ancestor was the King of Sweden. And her own mother was a great-aunt of the heir to the Tsar's throne, Peter III. He was the one for whom 16-year-old Sophie was to become a suitable match. It was a politically advantageous alliance. The alliance with Prussia guaranteed Russia military backing and the successful perpetuation of the venerable royal lineage.
This is the official version of this union. Indeed, Sophie was not selected randomly. The decisive factor in the girl's future marriage was the personal motives of the then Russian Empress Elizabeth. In her youth, she was engaged to Prince Karl August of Germany. However, he died on the eve of the wedding. Heartbroken Elizabeth could not forget her beloved. And even after ascending to the Russian throne, she maintained ties with her relatives. Specifically, with Sophie's mother, who was the sister of the late prince. Thus, when the time came to select a bride for her son, the prospective successor to the Russian throne, Elizabeth chose Sophie. 1745, Russia. Sophie didn't care about her mother's aspirations for her, or the political alliances that the empires sought to form with each other. She was pleased to finally leave the house and start a genuine life under the new name, Catherine. In a new and unfamiliar country, beside the man she loved and whom she was certain would love her. Thinking this way, she had no idea what a terrible ordeal was ahead. She was alone in her room. Her heart was beating furiously. She would get up, lie down, and get up again. At 16, she still didn't know what a husband and wife are supposed to do on their wedding night. The groom entered the room, but she drew back. During the wedding, the nervous Catherine didn't get a chance to properly look at her husband. Now she looked at him carefully for the first time.
Later, Catherine will affectionately refer to him as our monster, and in fact, it was not so unjust. He was slim, not particularly attractive. His face was somewhat unappealing. But once again, I stress that this does not matter. You don't need to employ modern strategies. Either I like a guy or I don't. And nobody is asking whether you like him or not. Your task is to get married.
And when Peter spoke, the girl realized that her fiancé was an imbecile. Peter slowly moved toward the bed and suddenly fell to the floor. Catherine was at a loss for words. She hurried towards him. A strong scent of wine hit my nose. Her husband was very drunk. And now he was snoring loud.
The following night, a new surprise awaits Catherine. The man is not going to touch her. Instead of making love, he plays his favorite game. He arranges soldiers on the sheet like this and fights enthusiastically. This will continue every night for 9 consecutive years.
Catherine is upset. No one seems to care about her. Her only solace is horseback riding, but even then, only when accompanied by bodyguards. It is sorrowful and distressing, but each time she mounts her horse, she recalls her mother's cries. After all, these walks satisfy her long-standing fantasies. Riding a horse across the field, going further and further, not stopping until a pleasant warmth spreads in the lower abdomen. In the middle of the night, she weeps. She is frightened and embarrassed. Catherine knows she is a naughty little mischief maker. She believes she deserves only one thing: scorn. However, she also knows that otherwise, she simply won't be able to bear it. She will go insane.
Catherine is, by and large, a normal, healthy woman. Her reproductive system, so to speak, required a certain level of maintenance and care. And this simply did not happen.
Like a madwoman, she spurred the horse on, driving it further and further. The primary objective was to escape from the guards. And there, it doesn't matter whether she is injured or killed, she doesn't care anymore. She was tired of solitude, of her own dreadful fantasies. Her horse reared up. She closed her eyes. A thought flashed through her mind. This is the end. Suddenly, strong arms lifted her up. She felt the warmth of the hug, looked up at her rescuer, and froze. He looked like a fairy tale prince, handsome, slender, and courageous. He saved her from death. The girl's heart was pounding wildly, and there was only one thought in my head. May it last forever. And so it will indeed happen. Officer Sergei Saltykov will find a way to meet Catherine, and she will fall for his strong arms. He will be the first to pave the way to happiness for her. He will be the first to teach her the art of love, the first to show her that her dreams are not perversions, but expressions of sensuality. Saltykov is astonished. The princess is still a virgin, and God forbid, she becomes pregnant. The only way to resolve the situation is to understand why Peter did not approach his wife. Saltykov finds a solution. He charms the prince and initiates a discussion about sensual pleasures. Peter first brags, then makes an oath, and soon sheds a tear. It turns out that he has a physical condition. This can be corrected by performing a circumcision procedure. But Peter is scared of doctors. Saltykov resorts to a strategy. He tells the prince about the joys of love, persuading him that he cannot deny himself such delights. The inebriated prince lifts another glass and concurs. In half an hour, his problem would disappear.
The discussion was about a brief bridle, also known as phimosis, which refers to the constriction of the foreskin. A few incisions with a scalpel and a bandage. This made sexual intercourse at least non-traumatic and pain-free for the man.
For Catherine, the sudden recovery of her husband is a real tragedy. Ultimately, Peter understood what he had been missing, and from then on, he would approach his wife every night with a certain awkwardness, and she bore with it. Catherine imagined that this was not Peter, but Sergei, the love of her life, the man for whom she would do anything, the man whose child she carries in her womb. It was excruciating torture. The labor lasted almost a day, and now the tired and exhausted Catherine could finally rest. She only wanted one thing, to see her Sergei. He silently approached her bed. Elated, she sprang up. But Sergei didn't look up. He spoke distantly and nervously. Catherine couldn't believe it. He was getting married. It's a very profitable deal. I can't miss this opportunity. He continued to speak, but she could no longer hear. She simply asked her lover to leave. Was it all just an illusion? The feelings and the intimacy? She wanted to scream, but she couldn't make a sound. At that moment, something inside her died.
She knew, of course, that empresses or princesses, even if they have affairs with officers, do not marry them. But most likely it was due to this disappointment that her perception of palace life was ultimately shaped. Nothing lasts forever. You can't always be honest. You'll still face betrayal and abandonment.
She will remember this moment forever. For the first time, a deep, fierce hatred is born in her soul, and her first victim will be her own child.
The future Emperor Paul. I would live like a prisoner. Catherine will banish him and order that he be guarded. Deprived of his mother's affection and interaction with his peers, the boy will gradually start to lose his sanity, believing that the Empress despises him and wants him dead. That's why he will never let go of his knife and eats almost nothing, suspecting that the food is poisoned.
Catherine will truly despise her son, just as she despised his father a little earlier. After Saltykov's betrayal, she will forbid herself from loving, and consequently, from suffering. She will swear that she will have many husbands now. All of them will serve her like dogs serve their masters.
Our protagonist promises herself that she will never, ever love anyone. She'll only employ men as companions for casual strolls, you know? But in reality, deep down in her soul, she wondered, is there even one person who needs me?
Her new chosen one, the Polish man Stanislaw Poniatowski, is handsome and gallant. However, he doesn't know what love is. Why did she need him? It's hard to believe, but as Catherine herself confesses in her memoirs, the young man essentially became an anatomical guide for her. He groaned, pleading not to stop, begging for more and more. She just smiled. He is so easy to understand. Just a touch and it reacts. One kiss there and he goes wild. It It seemed that after this dance, she was to become a queen before whom no suitor could resist.
Her insatiable desire, which was accompanied by a yearning for constant pleasure, was driven by a deep-seated insecurity about whether she truly belonged. She was always fearful of being reprimanded, of people being displeased with her. That's why she appeared so domineering.
6 months later, Poniatowski would be summoned home. During the farewell, he will weep and she will feign sadness. However, that's not all.
After ascending to power, Catherine will remember Poniatowski. She will make her beloved the King of Poland. But then he will partition the country and annex the largest, most valuable piece to the Russian crown. This will not only happen to the unfortunate Pole. For her, Grigory Potemkin will dismantle the Zaporizhzhia Sich and annex Crimea. Gentleman Sasha Lanskoy will be responsible for science and art. And men with limited mental capacity will merely be puppets in bed. They will still serve it, just like Grigory Orlov, for example.
The year 1761. Empress Elizabeth of Russia did not leave her chambers for several weeks. She was dying. Only one topic was discussed at the Empress's court. Will Mad Peter become the next king? Catherine knew it was time to act. All she needed to do was find a reliable man, and she would indeed find him.
This man's name was Grigory Orlov. He was an officer in the Tsar's guard. They saw each other almost every day. Catherine shared fascinating tales about the dynasties of kings and their eras of reign, while Orlov simply listened. As the queen later admitted, he was a poor conversationalist. Throughout his life, Grigory never read a single book. He wrote like a chicken with a foot, unable to string two words together. But Catherine was not interested in his intellect. She was interested in something else entirely.
And this other matter was not about sex at all. Orlov had 5 brothers. All of them were officers. In the barracks, they are considered kings and gods. Isn't that what concerns Catherine the most? Isn't that what makes her sigh with pleasure? After all, while she is in Grigory's arms, his relatives are already singing her praises in the army. In this way, they are paving the way for a power grab. The Orlov brothers will not disappoint her. After the Empress's death, they will orchestrate a coup, topple Peter, and elevate Catherine to power. And then they will give an invaluable gift. They will eliminate Peter. Thus, Catherine would one day become a widow and the sole ruler of Russia.
Catherine was a pragmatic woman. She clearly understood that this is the quality of any statesman. Not only in the 18th century, but also in the Roman Empire, and even now, the goal is to choose capable individuals. Catherine had this ability. That's why it became significant, but it wasn't truly great.
The year 1772. That year, Catherine assigned Orlov a significant task, to negotiate with Turkey. The courtiers could not conceal their astonishment. Everyone was aware that an attractive man lacked understanding in diplomacy. What peculiar game was Catherine playing? However, Orlov himself is satisfied. He hopes that the successful fulfillment of this task will enhance his credibility in Catherine's eyes. However, Orlov didn't realize that he was being discarded like an old, unwanted dress, as a new one was already prepared. After Orlov's departure, a new favorite moved into his quarters. 28-year-old guard officer Alexander Vasilchikov. Catherine's former lover learns about his reputation, extending far beyond the empire's borders. The enraged Orloff rushed to Catherine. He was still hoping to rectify the situation. Upon arriving at St. Petersburg, Grigory was halted and held until the messenger arrived. He hands over the eagle box and some certificates. It is Catherine who sends her favorite jewelry, her royal title, and complete autonomy. However, under the condition that the former lover remains silent and doesn't create any scandals. The despondent Orlov would survive for several more years. He will become intoxicated, squander all his possessions, and eventually lose his sanity. Grigory would die at the age of 43. Catherine will express regret, but nothing more. So none of them will harm her or break her heart. She needs men for sex and assistance in governmental matters. Catherine did not realize how mistaken she was. The Empress will break her promise only once and will pay dearly for it. She looked with disgust at her lover, who threw himself at her feet. This morning, she decided to say goodbye to her ex-lover, Oleksandr Vasilchikov. His tears annoyed the Empress. I was just a regular prostitute. That's how they treated me. This is what the aggrieved young man wrote in his memoirs. But those were the game rules. The old lover was succeeded by a new one, Grigory Potemkin.
By that time, he had already become a colonel, then a general. He, a young general from the Russian-Turkish war front, arrives in the capital. Catherine accepted him and appointed him as the adjutant general. She installed him in the Winter Palace, and he became a high-ranking official. He is not just a general anymore, but a political figure.
How pleasure can be constant and monotonous. Potemkin, however, was able to offer her something more varied. In other words, he succeeds in being a servant, a master, an executioner, and a martyr. Considering her early life experiences, Catherine probably required a multifaceted relationship where roles could be interchangeably switched. Potemkin offered her this kind of relationship dynamic.
Unlike his previous partners, this one is not only skilled in intimate matters, but also in public affairs. This combination drives Catherine crazy. Potemkin becomes as essential to her as air. It was in Potemkin's arms that Catherine broke her own vow not to fall in love. Blissfully ignorant, she didn't know. Her feelings for this man will become detrimental to her.
Oh, Mr. Potemkin, what a wicked marvel you have created. What a disgrace, what a transgression. Catherine II was consumed by a passionate love.
This is what the Empress wrote in a letter to her favorite. And here's another message, even more astounding. In it, the Empress refers to Potemkin as her husband. What is this? A metaphor? Historians were unable to explain this for a long time, until they discovered the family archives of nobility close to the Empress.
The wedding of ordinary people, Grigory and Catherine, took place. It happened here, in the Moscow Church of the Great Ascension. A record of this clandestine marriage was maintained for a long time by one of Potemkin's nieces, Countess Branicka. Later, the Countess ordered it to be thrown into the sea. This was the last will of Katerina and her husband, Hrihori.
There is reason to believe that they got married in 1775. In reality, Potemkin was the favored one of the Empress, not her spouse. That's why Catherine later delegated immense power to Potemkin. And Potemkin is well aware that he is not just a boy in the service of the Empress. He is a man of great power.
She sincerely believed that everything would be different from now on. He was the hero of her dreams. Great, courageous, caring, and intelligent. In his arms, she forgot about everything. Catherine was happy and could indulge any whim of her lover. The year 1775. The Winter Palace was buzzing like a stirred beehive. It can't be. The Empress has just entered the throne room with her new favorite. This is a young Ukrainian, Petro Zavadovsky. The courtiers can't believe their own eyes. Where is Grigory Potemkin? And no one knew that this man was actually introduced to Catherine by Grigory himself. He personally settled him in the Empress's palace. He even gave his successor an Eastern-style robe that could be easily removed. But why did he do this? At first, it seemed like a fun game. Aware of the Empress's fondness for experimentation, Grigory suggested that Catherine introduce some excitement into their relationship. This spice was a delightful new discovery.
Such openings in the walls have been present in palaces since ancient times. They were primarily used for eavesdropping. However, Potemkin devised a different purpose for this loophole. He spied on his girlfriend when she was with another man. The Empress was aware of this and was incredibly excited. For Catherine, it was a novel, uncommon sensation that left her breathless.
Beside the throne now stood two lovers, one old and one new. Despite the courtiers' expectations, Potemkin did not vanish. He returns to his seat to the right of Catherine. The Empress and the one-eyed man consult each other again and meet with the ambassadors once more. A young darling yawns in the background. Zavadovsky is not interested in state affairs. He wants to enjoy himself and dance. But he won't be yawning for long. In just 2 months, Potemkin will replace him with a new favorite. This is what diplomat Corberan wrote in a message to the French government. Potemkin is now playing the same role as the Marquise de Pompadour did during the reign of Louis XV. The Ukrainian Zavadovsky had just retired, and in his place, Potemkin introduced Major Zorik of the Hussars to the Empress. They all had lunch together. Catherine loved this relationship. It was so new and strange. She didn't notice. Her lover's actions were not driven by emotions, but by calculation. He wanted to make it subordinate, dominate it, and gain absolute power in the state.
Governor-General of Novorossiya, Commander-in-Chief of the Black Sea Fleet, Commander-in-Chief of all Russian naval forces. In the south, colossal power. Moreover, this power is informal, as in any monarchy, it's not just about the position you hold, but also the fact that you can kick open the door to the Empress at any moment and dictate what should be done.
Over time, Potemkin established a whole assembly line. First, he would select a young man, and then a doctor would examine him. To evaluate the candidate's suitability, the lady-in-waiting, Countess Bruce, spent the first night with him. This even resulted in her being nicknamed the Test Lady.
Incredibly, Potemkin transformed this system into a business. He knew that every new lover found 100,000 rubles in his room. This is the first gift from Catherine the Great. He received 100,000 as payment. No one refused. Everyone understood that they would receive a plethora of gifts in the future. Diamonds, houses, titles, and a lifetime pension. Catherine spared no expense for her lovers.
Despite the presence of many attractive young men, Catherine missed Grigory. She wished for him to spend more time with her, but he was preoccupied with his own interests. Potemkin purposefully settled in an annex linked to the palace by a short and convenient passage. When Catherine pleaded with him for closeness, he kindly visited the Empress. Then he would arrange an oriental extravaganza with various accessories and exotic entertainment.
A leather whip and handcuffs. Today, such accessories are accessible to everyone. However, in Russia at that time, such objects were used solely for punishment and were in no way suitable for sexual pleasure. Thus, Potemkin had to give them orders. Some pieces from Russian masters, some from Parisian masters, and even some from Turkey. However, Potemkin was prepared to do anything to convince his mistress that he was, is, and will always be the best.
And Grigory managed to accomplish what seemed impossible. He completely won over Catherine and continued to provide her with young men. For many of them, the Empress was akin to a grandmother, but she remained indifferent. In an attempt to please her beloved, the Queen nearly lost her sanity. Her life turned into a marathon, during which Catherine failed to notice the terrible truth.
Her most secret and potent weapon, sex, turned against her. And now, due to her, the country is not governed by her, but by her lover Potemkin. Unbeknownst to her, Catherine transformed into a puppet, blinded by love and the desire to please.
The realization will come too late. Catherine left the house and leaned heavily against the door. Her head was spinning. She looked like she was about to faint. This could not happen. Not now. Not again. Everything happened again. Her beloved Grigory, just as Sergei had once done, betrayed her. With whom? With his nieces. She refused to believe it for a long time. The terrifying images she saw in the window of the Potemkin wing flashed before her eyes. As soon as these girls approached her, they threw themselves at her feet, scared, pleading for mercy. That's the truth. Catherine was shocked. It was the final, most dreadful blow. Catherine was 60. She was a fragile, powerless, elderly woman. It seemed like life was over.
Here she was again, left alone and betrayed, with another woman chosen in her place. Naturally, this was deeply hurtful to her, but the crux of the matter was that she understood this man was not the right one for her either. She once again concluded that she was alone, neglected and unwanted by anyone. Nobody loves her for no reason. This is simply a matter of closure, as psychologists would say. And the usual solution is to let go of the old and welcome the new.
In a few days, Potemkin will return to the palace. He will approach the Empress and be left speechless. A young, handsome man stands next to her. Grigory looked at him as if through a mirror. The distinguished officer, Platon Zubov, will exude the same influence as Potemkin himself once did. But that's not what surprised Grigory. It was the first time that the Empress had a young man with her who was not accompanied by her. Grigory did not know. Observing the distraught Empress, the courtiers adeptly exploited the situation. They introduced her to a young, charming guardsman, and the bereaved elderly woman accepted this substitute. She felt more comfortable in Zubov's arms. Catherine will never let Potemkin visit her again, and she will never forgive him. He will be sent out of the palace. The Empress will grant him complete freedom, but she will never be able to forget him. The most influential person in Russia will soon perish on the roadside like a pauper. Catherine would outlive him by 5 years. It will be 5 years of unprecedented excess. The royal court will be engulfed in debauchery. In this manner, Catherine attempted to suppress her intense longing for Potemkin and her fervent desire for his embrace. This is what Mason, the tutor of the Empress's grandchildren, wrote about this in his memoirs. Catherine's decadent desires have not subsided. On the contrary, orgies and unrestrained activities continue in her bedroom. Now they were gathering in a crowd. The girls performed as an opening act, and their cheerfulness quickly lifted the queen from her depression.
Zubov persuaded Catherine to introduce new girls, and even took the responsibility of personally recruiting new members. He selected girls according to his preference from both serfs and freelancers, as long as they had no inhibitions. He also taught them himself. He explained to Catherine that he was working for her benefit.
Zubov completely succeeded his predecessor. However, he was never able to equal Potemkin in terms of state affairs.
That's why the Catherine of recent years is not the same Catherine as she was in the 70s and 80s. She doesn't possess that energy, those capabilities. And her preferences have changed from before. Who was her last favorite? Platon Alexandrovich Zubov, such an ambitious young fool. After Potemkin's death, he inherited all his titles, but not his abilities.
But Catherine was not concerned about how state affairs were conducted. She died at the age of 68. It left a massive empire, governed by a strong bureaucracy set up by the former and handled by the latter's favorites. Through the efforts of her husband, the Empress accomplished what Peter I and Elizabeth could not. The monarchy in Russia became absolute. This earned Catherine the title of the Great and set the course for the country's development for a long time. Just before the end, she was holding the hand of 22-year-old Platon Zubov. She affectionately called him Grushenka. He did not object. She passed away happily and assured that Grigory was once again by her side. As he had vowed at the altar, they would be together until death.